Okay, well, I'm set up. I'm going to be doing my bearing clearance, the bearing clearance for the rods. So that's what I'll be doing today. Got my rod vise. I got ARP. These rods are Eagle. They're for my f22 block. They're let's see here. I got the stamp on the rod. They're 5571. That's the size for the f22. Just to let you guys know, so you guys can't mistaken. I accidentally bought 4 rods for an h22, thinking that they would be the same, and they're not. So hopefully that saves you some money knowing. Eagle, I think, are the only ones that produce the right size for the f22s, unless you get some custom ones. But the bolts, the fasteners that I'll be using are Eagle 1.529 ARP 2000. It's a 3/8 bolt with a 7/16 head, and the torque, can't really go off the torque, but basically we're going to be stretching, and Eagle's paperwork says that the stretch should be 55 to 59 thousandths. That's what this guy does. So what you'll do is you'll take the measurement on your fastener, and they'll always have a different measurement. It ain't going to be at 0. So once I put that fastener in this, it's going to give me a reading, and then from that reading we got to go up basically 5 thousandths, or 5.5 to 59 thousandths on this gauge. So depending on what I torque the bolt to, that's how much stretch it should be. So let me explain. It's hard holding my phone and doing this, but basically what you'll do is you'll get this guy in here. Give me a second. Okay, so this guy reads 69.
How you doing?
Okay, well, hopefully you guys got the understanding. So if it reads almost 70 on your gauge, that's regular with the bolts at. You just got to add 5. So if you go up 5 of these marks, that's where you're going to want to be. See, I'm before 70, so I want to be pretty much 5 marks after, because that would be the half that it's adding in. And another thing to note is that I'm going to be running STDX, which is 0.005 of a thousandths thinner, and I'm going to put them on the main caps. So depending on where you guys select putting your bearings, you got to make sure they're the same. So if I'm going to run STDX on my main cap, I want them all on the main caps. You can't put one on the main cap and then go put a thin one over on the inside the rod. It's going to throw off your rods, your rod mains. So like I said, I'm going to put STDX in my main cap, and then inside the rod I'm going to put my standard bearing, and then I'm going to mic everything when I'm done. But basically, like on how you do it, you'd mic your main on your crank, which I've already done. It's around 1.888 point something, and then you'll set your bore gauge to match what your mic says to zero that out, and then you'll stick your bore gauge in here, and your bore gauge will give you what your clearance is at. I'm gonna probably have my dad help me with this one, but I still want to use plastic gauge to double check, so I'll probably have him hold the crank because I don't have a crank stand, and I'll go ahead and stretch the bolts on the crank and see what the plastic gauge reads. Eagle says I should be 2 thousandths and above, being that this is a high performance build. So I'm gonna shoot for, I think I'm gonna shoot for 0.0021 clearance on my rods, and hopefully you guys learned something. So that's what I gotta do. I'm gonna go ahead and put my standard bearing in there. I use brake parts cleaner just to make sure that they're all clean. You can't have any paper towel lint, any of that in there when you put the bearing. You don't want any oil, nothing. Even the oils from your hands, you don't want that. So if you can, just wear gloves. I've been messing with this a lot, so like I already know where I can't touch and what I can. yeah, so I'm gonna put the bearing in there. I'm gonna grab my ARP lube. I'm gonna lube these up, and then I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it down. Before I tighten it down, of course, I gotta have the stretch. So you want your regular of what this says in the gauge. So I know that this one's around 70. This guy right here is actually around 60, like 59, 60 on my gauge. And so what I'll do is I'll mic those after. So this guy should be around like 64. This dude should be around like 75 if I get it right. And when I torque them down and I get the stretch right, then I can actually use the torque that I got from the ratchet and torque down the main caps on the next one to around like what that says, and then check the stretch. And if it's around the same, I actually now have it cheap because I can torque them to that number and know that my stretch is where it needs to be. But always use the gauge to double check your stretch. I know I'm ranting on this, but hopefully you guys have an understanding of what I'm going to be doing. But let me film this, I'll show you. Another thing to note is I used my ARP lube on the threads. You just want to coat the threads. You don't want to like jam it in there, like put too much and like gulp it in. You just want to coat the threads. Another thing that I didn't cop on is that you can't mix up these end caps. When they were machined, they have to go on the same way they came off. So what they do is they have a number, and see how that number matches with that number? That tells me that this side goes to that side. The other side is actually blank, so you can't mess it up. On a factory rod, it's the same thing. You cannot mix end caps. You have to put the end caps back the way you took them off the rod. So hopefully that helps a lot of people. Just in case you didn't know that, you know now. Boys, tighten down. Not torqued yet, just tighten down. And I'm gonna go ahead and check the stretch. So I'll take it off the vise and just double check it. Something I wanted to touch on. You don't want to overstretch these bolts, and it's not the fact that you're going to hurt the bolts, it's actually the bearings. You can crush the bearings. It's called bearing crush. You can look it up, and let's just say like it's not good. Like your bearing could actually end up pretty messed up. So I'm going to go ahead, check the stretch on these, and put it back in the vise after, and make sure we're good. So far, this guy right here, I wrote down my measurements. So with the, I took the fastener out of the rod cap and put it on my stretch gauge. It actually read 64.2. And all the fasteners, when you go performance, they have divots, and the divots go on the needle. And then same with the top. There's actually a divot in the top of the bolt head. And with that thing pressed down, that gives you the perfect accurate measurement. So 64.2 on the left bolt, and then 58 perfect on the right. And remember, we gotta add 5.5 to these. So I'm looking around 5.5 thousandths to 59 thousandths, but you get the point. So let me do this. Well, the numbers have changed, so actually putting your end caps on your rods is probably the best to do. Just tighten it down to where this encloses. Don't like torque them down. Just make sure they're nice and tight to where the gap is enclosed. And then measure your stretch. My new numbers are now 38 on the left and 31 on the number side. So now what I'm gonna do is take my torque wrench, tighten these down to, I don't know, probably do like 40 pounds, and then check my stretch. If my stretch is then around, well, I don't want to go too overboard, so you know what, I'll torque them down to probably do like, I don't know, 25 pounds first. Check the stretch, because I don't want to go over and I don't want to go too less. So I'm going to give this a shot, but knowing that that's now 38 and that's 31, it's easy. Just add the 5. We should be around 36. Add the 5 to this, we should be around, I don't know how to count, so 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. We should be around 41, right? No, 43, my fault. Alright, so let's give it a shot. Okay, So just to let you know, I torqued these guys down to 35 foot-pounds, and my stretch only gained a little bit over 2 thousandths. So I still got pretty much 3 more thousandths to go. I'm going to go ahead and torque these guys down to, let's see, we'll add 10 pounds. So we'll go to 45 foot-pounds and then recheck the stretch and see what I got. So I'm going to give that a shot. Okay guys, I got this thing torqued down to 50 pounds, or 50 foot-pounds, and I am still 1,000th away. So I'm going to go ahead and go to 55 foot-pounds. And then I'll recheck the stretch. This is definitely giving you an idea of how much torque these things need, basically a regular stock build, because usually I think my book for the stock factory is 43 foot-pounds. That's been embedded in my head for like ever, and as you can see, the stretch ain't even close. So I'm gonna go ahead, torque this guy down to 55, check the stretch again. If we're close, then I'll probably give it a little bit more than 55. I'll probably go like 58. If we're not close and it still seems like it only moved like a little bit, I'm gonna go to 60, and then we'll check the stretch at 60 foot-pounds and vice versa. So I'll give you what I got, but this is why a rod bolt stretch gauge is definitely needed doing this, because if you guys went off of like what the paperwork for, I think it was, I'm trying to remember who it was Max Speeding rods. It said 45 foot-pounds for these fasteners, and then it also labeled the stretch, but as you can see, 45 foot-pounds only gave us like 0.003 of a stretch, not 0.005. So this is why always stretch your rod bolts. Don't go off factory torque unless you're doing a factory rebuild. I can see, because you're not going to have these divots in your fasteners on a stock one. So all right, let me get this over with. Okay, well, finished. I got these guys torqued down to 60 foot-pounds, and it put me right where I needed. So 60 foot-pounds on this guy is what it took to get the right stretch. I'm gonna see if I can lay my phone and try and show you guys the stretch. So give me a second. Grab my, here we go. All right, this side we started at, let me check my measurements. Started at, all right, we started at 38 on this side. So get my rod bolt stretch gauge all set up. Press down the tab. Okay, and as you can see, we're right over 43. So that gives me my little bit, yep. See, we're right over it. Not exactly, well, you know, I am gonna say that's 55, because that does look perfectly in the center. Nice. So 60 foot-pounds gave me what I wanted. So come over, I'll show you guys this side, the one with the numbers. Again, I ain't gonna stress it, the end caps have to go on the same way. So see these numbers? They line up with the right rod, right end cap. This one's gonna be a little tricky, as you can see.
So I'm not out here making a... Oh, you doing a video?
Ah, you're good. I was just... Yeah, Johan wanted to see on how you stretch rod bolt. But
Put them on the bolt stretcher.
I did. Oh, fuck, man. 60 foot-pounds. That's what it takes to get the right stretch.
Really?
Yeah, because like when I got the other rods, it said in the paperwork that it's 45 foot-pounds to torque them down to.
Mm-hmm.
And then check your stretch. 60 foot-pounds got me where I needed to be, so that's, yeah.
I figured I wouldn't make any.
Okay, we are in the garage, and as you can see, that is rod main 1. I just got done miking it, and we are at 1.88945.
not really too worried about the 4.5. I just know I'm around 1.889. And what we're gonna do now is set up the bore gauge to go between the mic. So I want to lock this setting, and we're gonna zero out the bore gauge. And once I get that zeroed out perfectly, then we can go check the bearing clearance on the rod. So yeah, let's do it. But the closest number to 0 would be your clearance. And by the looks of it, you're roughly a little over 2 thousandths. I still want to verify this with Plastigauge, just double check, but that seems to be where I'm about. Yeah, I won't go past that. So we're a little over 2 thousandths. And yeah, still want to verify with Plastigauge, so I will be doing that. But hopefully you guys got a good understanding of what goes into bottom assembly building. The torque wrench that I use was actually just a digital attachment you can buy at Harbor Freight, and actually it's been really good. I've done head jobs with it, haven't heard any complaints. Did a friend's Del Sol head with it, same thing. He hasn't been complaining the head gasket blown, so that says a lot. I've also used it on Dodge Ram and a Dodge Dakota. So if you guys don't have torque wrenches, or you're like me who do have torque wrenches but they don't work the way they should, that digital attachment has come in handy plenty of times, because I've had it where my torque wrench did not click and I ended up over tightening one of the bolts. That was not fun. So just give you guys a heads up. The bearings in this process are race bearings, and all these rods are high performance H-beams. So yeah, I don't want to mess up. This is a lot of money here. You guys can laugh about it, but that's why I think I got more money invested in engine building tools than actual parts. So, well, hopefully you guys learned something, 'cause I sure did.